working for peace in the future to work for peace in the present moment. A very good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. Law Essentials welcomes you to the first session of Lawyers as Peacemakers, an introduction to integrative law. Law Essentials is a student run initiative by a group of inquisitive law students having a phenomenal idea about the application of law in day to day life. We provide knowledge through continuous research, training, and development to improve learning by offering various certificate courses with highly qualitative professionals. Additionally, we also organize many webinars whereby law students get to bridge the gap between their academia and industry. We have with us today Ms. J. Kim Wright, Ms. Nabeela Siddiqui, and Ms. Nitya Bansal as well. Ms. J. Kim Wright is an integrative lawyer, innovator, systems change agent, strategist, and storyteller from the United States. Ms. Nabeela Siddiqui is a research-cum teaching assistant at the Dharmashastra National Law University, Madhya Pradesh. We also have with us Ms. Nitya Bansal, an advocate, mediator, and a peace scholar from Costa Rica, as the speaker for today's session. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to go ahead.
Thank you so much, Farhan. Yes, thank you so much, Farhan. We'll take over from here. So first, to begin with, I'll just like to quote Steve Kiva. So Steve Kiva once said that law is one of the greatest professions for the simple reason that we see that medicine heals the body, whereas clergy heals the soul, whereas law heals the societal rifts. So we are in an era where law is a bridging up agent. Law is an instrument of social change, as we see. So these are the few functionaries of law, and law has ever been an organic process, a process which is not circumscribed into limits, and that's what is needed at this point of time. Out of box thinking, as we call it. But then law sadly has been put up into characterization, into categories which are very narrow in its whole essence. But that is not the case. And that is where we have the idea of integrative law, the idea of integrative lawyers, and the idea of law as a healing agent. So does actually law heals? Yes, law does have an healing agent capacity when applied in the best sense. And for this particular reason, we are starting a pilot project in India, which is called as the Integrative Law Series, where we will bring approximately 6 continents, speakers from 6 continents, discussing and deliberating on ideas which are not only conventional, but also modern in approach. So you will be speaking on topics which might take you to a revisit at the history, but at the same time, a leap in the future. So with this idea, we have with us the founder of Integrative Law Movement, that is J. Kim Wright. And over to you, ma'am. We would like you to introduce us with the idea as to what integrative law is and how integrative law approaches different from other disciplines. Okay, Kim, ma'am.
Ma'am, you will have to unmute yourself to speak.
I guess I'm muted again. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, ma'am. Perfectly.
Okay. So I appreciate you calling me the founder, but I often consider myself more of the storyteller of a movement that's been developing. And so I'm going to first begin by telling you my story and how I got involved in this movement and sort of some of the milestones. And so I'm obviously much older than everyone else on the call. I graduated from law school in 1989. And when I was in law school, I was introduced to a way of practicing law and my classmates that were very adversarial. And in fact, I said that they were jerks and I didn't want to be a jerk. So I decided I was not going to practice law. And so I worked in other fields. I was the director of a domestic violence program. I did some research, but I was determined not to be a lawyer because I didn't want to be a jerk. In 1994, I was in a seminar, and this man was there visiting, and he stood up and he introduced himself. He said, "My name is Forrest Baird, and I practice law." And so it got my attention because he looked like a nice man. He didn't look like a jerk at all. And he continued, and he talked about how he thought that everyone should be granted dignity in the process, and that he was a divorce lawyer, and he thought that at the end of the divorce, the husband and wife should still be friends, and they should be able to raise their children together in an amicable way. Well, that was the first time I'd heard of that, and it was just amazing. I thought the world went from black and white to color at that moment for me, and I saw a new possibility for what law practice could be, that lawyers could be peacemakers and healers. And so I immediately opened a practice. I had a big family, and there was no way that anybody was going to hire me into a law practice with the complexity in my life. So I opened my own, and then I experimented. I did that in two different blocks of time, from 1995 to 2000, and then later from 2003 to 2008. I experimented in a small town in the U.S. state of North Carolina with a lot of different ideas. But how could I be a peacemaker? And at that time, I discovered things like collaborative law and mediation and restorative justice. And in the year 2000, my husband at the time got a job in another state, and so we moved for a few years. And I wasn't able to practice law, so I started an organization called the Renaissance Lawyer Society. And Renaissance Lawyer Society was about showcasing these ways of practicing law and starting to gather people. So I became a connector and a gatherer of people who were doing law in a different way. I was also involved in the International Alliance of Holistic Lawyers, which is an organization that no longer exists, but was an important founder of this movement as well. And we worked together to bring some of these ideas into the mainstream. So over the years, I collected a lot of people. I would hear about somebody who was doing something really innovative. I'd read it in the newspaper, see it on television. The internet was very new, so we didn't see much on the internet. But because I created a website for Renaissance Lawyer Society, people would find me, and they would tell me that they thought they were alone, and they wanted to practice in this new way. And so I started getting a really big collection of lawyers, and I would do things like have bridge lines where people would call in. And someone told me that it would be a good thing if I had a magazine. And that was when magazines still existed in a different way than most of them do today. And I thought, well, that's what I'll do. I'll start a magazine, and we'll tell the stories of the lawyers who are doing these interesting things, and then everybody can read about them. Well, magazines, actually the Independent Press Association announced that magazines were a thing of the past, and they were the organization that was all about magazines. So instead, I decided I would start another website, and that the website would be actually videos of people. This was, the internet was changing from dial-up to faster internet, and I was able to put video up for the first time around 2008. And so I got a videographer and closed my office and gave up my home, and I became a nomad traveling around the world to showcase this movement. So I called that the US tour, and I created a YouTube channel. And then out of that came my first book called Lawyers as Peacemakers, which was published by the American Bar Association. And that included the stories of what I was learning about this movement. Well, it was really a weird movement at that time. People thought that it was just a little strange because it wasn't what we were used to in law. And so when the American Bar Association offered to publish my book, I went from being just really weird, like sort of the queen of the weird lawyers, to a more mainstream kind of attitude about the work. And so I continued to travel. And in 2012, I actually got my my first invitation overseas. I started traveling internationally to Australia, South Africa, Europe, to India, which Nitya will talk about in a little while. And then the last continent I went to was Brazil. So I ended up going to all of the continents and many countries. And I collected stories about what was going on, and that became the book called Lawyers as Changemakers, which the American Bar Association published in 2016. So now I'm in a different place. I am in I'm in the place of having no more ability to travel. So I'm saying that that COVID-19 has ushered me into a new era. And things like this series are now possible, that people were not so focused on being online before, and now they are. And I'm actually working again on all continents. So this is just a little bit of a display of some of the places I've been. I've done hundreds of trainings and lectures. I've had thousands of interactions with the most cutting edge lawyers in the world. So whether it's speaking from a podium or having a cup of tea, I've met a lot of people, and I've come to some conclusions on the way. And one of those conclusions is that we are in a paradigm shift, that we are shifting from the old way of practicing law to new ways. And I use these images to display the paradigm shift, because when you look at these images, in most cases, you will see, when I look, I see a duck, and I see an old woman, and I see a frog. And when and if I were not more closely examining that, I would just think that's all was there. But if you look at the duck and you turn just a little bit, you actually can see there's also a rabbit. And you just have to kind of change the way you're viewing it. And if you look at the old woman, or maybe you see the young woman first, there's both an old woman and a young woman in that image. And the frog is also a horse. And most people have the harder time seeing that. You really have to turn your head or your computer to see that the what we see possibly first as a frog, actually the eye of the frog is the nostril of the horse. And so it requires us to start thinking and being able to hold the old and the new at the same time. And that's what I ask you to do with the integrative law, is to hold the old and the new at the same time. So as I studied this movement, I found that there are elements, and I wrote about this in my Lawyers as Changemakers book. I asked about 500 lawyers that I considered to be integrative lawyers to tell me what they thought integrative law was, or to show me a story, an example. And they wrote beautiful pieces, that most of which are included in the book. And I started to see that the elements of integrative law were the four that I'm about to tell you about. One is that integrative lawyers are reflective, and that can show up in mindfulness. It can show up in emotional intelligence, well-being, and the idea that lawyers can be healers. And to be a healer, you actually have to look at your own life and to heal what's going on with you. So there are a lot of aspects that we'll be looking at through this series that have to do with being reflective. Integrative lawyers share a set of values, and these were the values that came up the most. Not every integrative lawyer has all of these values, but I found these over and over again. And so compassion and dignity, happiness and well-being, reuniting love and law, creativity, being inclusive and humanizing the stakeholders in the system, embracing challenges, being relational, making the world a better place, and law is a spiritual path, were values that repeated over and over again. And then there was this systemic thinking and design thinking. They both were existing, where people were realizing their interconnectedness and understanding client perspectives from a different way, not considering themselves sort of the all-powerful, but more of the partner of the client in resolving an issue. And then there was also this change maker orientation. And then there was this evolutionary consciousness. That's the heralding of a new consciousness into the world that integrative lawyers are part of. That's part of that being a change maker. So we're evolving the law. And as we evolve the law, because the law is such an important part of society, then we are evolving the society as well. So out of that shift in being and perspective, new models emerge. And so those new models are many, and they share those values and perspectives. These are just some of them. This is a really this graphic was done almost 10 years ago. So a lot of things have developed in the last 10 years, but it gives you an idea that some people are working on a very personal level, and they're and they're doing their own sort of consciousness work or their own healing work. And some people are doing that at the relational level and working between small groups of people. Then there's the organizational level, the systemic level, and then the changing the world. So, for example, Earth jurisprudence is actually looking at a much bigger conversation. But they're all levels, and some of us are called to work at one level, and some are called to work at another. But it's all part of the whole. So I'm going to talk about some of the models. We're not going to talk about all of them, but I hope over the course of this series, we get to talk about many of them. And so one of them is called conscious contracts. Now, conscious contracts is actually a registered trademark for a process of contract formation. And it has two distinct pieces that are different from usual contract formation. Usually they are written in plain language and they're more client-centered and all of that, which is basically what good contract drafting is about now. But in the conscious contracts model, the touchstone is a piece. And the touchstone is the beginning of the process. And the people actually sit down who are going to enter the contract, and they come to a true meeting of the minds. They have a conversation about who they are. What are their values? What is the purpose of doing this? How are they going to, make the world a better place? Is what my friend Linda Alvarez talks about. She wrote a book about this model. So how is this contract going to make the world a better place? Either by providing, funds for something, or just as in the case of social entrepreneurship, actually changing the society in some way. Once we have that conversation about the touchstone, our next conversation is about how are we going to address change and engage disagreement. And that clause allows the parties to design their culture, so how they're going to communicate, how they're going to manage change, and how they're going to address things that come up. So those difficult conversations, like how are we going to have these difficult conversations? Because in any relationship, they happen. So I don't know if you've heard the term VUCA, the VUCA world. It's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. That's what VUCA stands for. And it's very common now in business to hear that word. And these contracts are actually well suited for a world where there's a lot of that volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So in a completely different area of law, there's restorative justice, and that's about healing the harm of crime. And that's about the idea that punishing the offender does not necessarily translate into justice for the victim. The victim actually has their own concerns, and we should be taking those into account. We should be taking the community into account. And so in restorative justice, we believe that justice is about undoing the harm, repairing the loss, and giving the sense of security back to the victims so they can have closure and move on. It's also about having the so-called offender perpetrator. We actually sometimes don't even use those words because sometimes it's not as clear as that. But having that person also be able to make amends and heal and move on with a more productive life. There's this movement that the overall name is multisensory law. And that's about using visuals and even audio and legal documents to communicate legal principles. So the whole idea of comics as contracts. So here are some examples. Up in the top where there's an engineering company called Archon. They have, I think, 7,000 employees, and their employment contract is now a comic. And so they have these avatars of the company and the people, and they go through the contract, piece by piece, as with bubbles and text, small amounts of text rather than 5,000 or 6,000 words of a contract. And they've actually found it to be a much more successful approach. Down below that, an organization in Spain, these are just some examples, they use visuals in their contracts. So it's RTALE, and this is for people who often don't speak the same language. And so they use the pictures to support some of the words on the page so that people can actually follow along and understand. Then in the middle here is a contract. Actually, it won an award from the international, IACCM, Contracts and Commercial Management Organization, and this is for agricultural workers. And if you want to look at this, it's creative-contracts.com. And then also communicating legal principles from India. There's Law Tunes, which is a comic book about legal principles. So these are some of the things that are going on in law that you probably haven't seen much in law school, but it's a worldwide movement to move away from the complexity of a lot of language that is hard to understand and actually make it more user and client friendly. I mentioned earlier Earth jurisprudence, and Earth jurisprudence is about honoring the intrinsic value of nature and the interconnectedness of all life on Earth. And so it's recognizing that the well-being of every member of the Earth community depends on the well-being of the Earth as a whole. And it shows up in things like the rights of nature, ending ecocide, crimes against future generations. And I hope we'll have some of the experts in Earth jurisprudence come and talk with us during this series. Therapeutic jurisprudence comes from the idea that law is a social force and there are unintended consequences, and they can either be therapeutic or anti-therapeutic, beneficial or harmful. And so the people in therapeutic jurisprudence actually study those consequences and whether and they showcase the therapeutic ways that law can be used. And again, another topic that I hope we'll look at. And these topics I'm not going to go into, but just to give you an idea, these are some things that I could have. We can do a whole day on talking about these, and I hope that many of these are going to be in the program over the coming months. There are many more innovations, ideas, and approaches, and they all come out of that paradigm shift. And so the paradigm shift allows for people to be more creative and to design their law practices in a way that is more holistic and humane, compassionate, and even you may see humor in law. There are people who actually have studied the use of humor and the proper use of humor that I hope will join us and speak to us about that. Now, you may be wondering, what about technology? Because usually when we hear about innovation, we talk about technology, and I love technology. I'm not one of those people that hates technology. I built the first lawyer website in the United States for my law practice back in the 90s. I have all my toys, and I love technology. But technology is a tool, and pretty soon, artificial intelligence is going to take over the monotonous tasks of being a lawyer. And what's going to be left? So after AI starts doing all of the monotonous things, what's going to be left is the human part of law, the part that AI can't do. So the part about human connections and empathy and compassion, other kinds of thinking other than just the intellectual thinking, that's what's going to be left for us to do. And so I believe that integrative law is a very important evolution for that stage. And then I like this quote: the most exciting breakthroughs of the 21st century will not occur because of technology, but because of an expanded concept of what it means to be human. So we're gonna be doing this series, and we're going to be talking about a lot of these topics. And I I told Law Essentials that I could continue the series for at least 3 years before I would have to every month before I would have to give any thought, because all of these are fascinating topics, and they're interesting, and I know all of the people who can share about these, and they're all passionate about them and happy to come and speak with you. So I'm looking forward to continuing. There's the website for Law Essentials, and then if you want to connect with me, you can find me on my LinkedIn. And with that, I'm going to.
Thank you so much, Kim. I guess you've given us a quick wrap up as to what integrative law is and what the whole movement is all about through your own personal experiences and journey. It was very insightful. At the same time, it was also enlightening and rich in its texture to understand that there are so many facets of law which could be actually viewed from an angle which are not only innovative and creative, but can have a human touch in the longer sense. So this reminds me of a poem by John Keats. So John Keats has famously written Ode on Poets, I guess. So he writes that bards of passion and of mirth, ye have left your souls on earth. Have ye souls in heaven too? Double lived in regions new. That means you have double existence, both in heaven and on earth. So I think that is what we're trying to explore. We are trying to circumscribe both the old technologies and techniques with the future prospects, so that a better future lies ahead of us. So that's very well put up by Kim. We would like to know as to what India has to offer in this whole scenario, and how welcoming this idea is in the Indian perspective. For which I think we'll move on to our next speaker, which is Miss Nitya. And Miss Nitya happens to be one of the first advocates of integrative law in India, and we're privileged to have with her. Ms. Nitya, please could you highlight the ideas behind integrative law and how the process actually happened in India and what is the whole procedure all about? Yes, over to you, Ms. Nitya.
Thank you, Nabeela. First of all, I'd like to really congratulate you, Farhan, and Law Essentials team for actually taking off this, lawyers as peacemakers series. I think it's really, really needed in this time. So to give you all a background about my work and in relation to Kim's work is basically, I was of course practicing as a lawyer when I kind of decided just there has to be more to law than just, the regular practice, the regular adversarial work that I was doing in the courts. So that's how I connected to Kim, and I learned about this whole paradigm shift to the practice of law and these different available options that we have. And I think basically, we connected, and then came to India in 2015. And I'm going to run you all through some of the development, or basically that time some of the meetings that we had or some events that we organized while Kim was here. So basically, to lay the foundation of the integrative law movement in India. And this I'll do using my presentation, which I'm going to share now. So yeah, this was in October 2015 when Kim arrived, and yes, I was way younger. Kim was still the same. And so this is me with this elephant is basically a Kim's. I don't know, she didn't show it here today, but this is her way of also elaborating upon the integrative law movement. I really loved it, and of course, it's me with Kim. So some of the events that we conducted basically were with different, organizations and universities. And this was one of the, I think one of the first ones. This is Delhi Dispute Resolution Society. It's a Delhi government funded society. It's this society basically has around 9 or maybe 11 centers all over Delhi, and they conduct pre-litigation mediations. So I believe they're like the first of its kind in India, because we do have mediations or court annexed mediations a lot, but I don't think before DDRS we had any pre-litigation mediation centers. I believe now we do have many. So we had a session on future of mediation by Kim for the mediators of this society. To the left or to the right, I mean, this gentleman, he's justice. He's a former Delhi High Court Justice Mohanlal Mehta. He's the founder and chairperson of Delhi Dispute Resolution Society. So he helped us organize this, and he was really forthcoming and welcoming to the concept of integrative law, and he really was supportive of it. And of course, he himself is a lawyer, is a change maker in lawyer, because he's the one who probably introduced pre-litigation mediation in the Indian context. So yes, this is with us with them. The next I would like to bring up, I think since most of our audience here is law students, I believe, so they would all be aware of Symbiosis Law School. So this was our session on mediation. I believe it was more on divorce mediation, so somewhat related to collaborative law. And this was in Symbiosis Law School, Noida. And I think it was a very, very well organized and very well appreciated by the students, the session. We had some fun. As you can see, we had some simulated mediations here. And on the picture in the top, if you see, this is Professor Chandrasekhar Ravandale. He's the dean. He's been the dean of Symbiosis Law School for a while. And yes, he was also very welcoming to the whole concept of mediation. He was very supportive to mediation. Between me and Kim in this photo is another advocate, Mr. Adab Singh. He's also into matrimonial law. So he really liked Kim's perspective to collaborative law, or basically, mediations that end up with the couple being friends. So yeah, so the session was a lot about that. Okay, this is another, so this bunch of people, basically the gentleman here is Mr. Niranjan Bhatt. He's a senior advocate in Gujarat High Court, and he's a renowned mediator as well. And yes, Kim had a very fruitful meeting with him as well. And the two pretty ladies here are Kanandru to the left of Kim, and to the right of Mr. Niranjan Bhatt is Kelly Dhru. So Kanandru and Kelly Dhru are actually the founders of RFGI, which is Research Foundation for Governance in India. And they are also the founders of Law Tunes, which I believe should be more popular. I think Kim already mentioned it in her slide before, in her presentation before. And if students don't know, I would say they should go look it up. So Law Tunes is like, it is about legal awareness through comics. And the two of them, they founded it. Kanan, to the one to the left of Kim, is actually also she won an award in 2005 2014, I believe, for from the Hague Institute of International Law for her project Law for Me, which is again about access to justice. And with Kanan and basically I, and we had another person, Mr. Vasu. Together, we founded also the India chapter of Legal Hackers, which I will move on to now. But yes, this meeting again was fruitful and supportive work for Kim. Okay, so this was an event that was organized by Legal Hackers with IP leaders. This event was basically about lawyers who were change makers in India. So this bunch of group that you can see on the screen has some of the lawyers who are basically legal entrepreneurs in a way, or they are working on some specific non-conventional fields in law. And this meetup was actually all about people sharing in what ways they are bringing change in this industry. So in this meetup, you can again see Justice M.L. Mehta here next to Kim. I will also briefly highlight, so the one standing behind Kim is Kian Guns. He is the founder and editor of Legally India. I believe a lot of law students would be aware of it, especially those who like to conduct search or who are into keeping themselves updated with legal news or news about law firms, etc. So Kian Guns is here. Then we have here Ramanuj Mukherjee. He's the founder of IP Leaders, I think, which is again it is an online legal education platform. And this one with him, so they are both the co-founders and co-founders of IP Leaders. Again, they've innovated law in their own way. Next to Ramanuj Mukherjee is Ritvik Lukos. He's founder of Bahura. Bahura is, I think, one of the renowned legal recruitment firms. And of course, they're also innovating into a lot of things. They are a legal search and consulting platform as well. And yeah, there were, so that's about it. There's others who are also working on different projects here. And we had Kim speaking. Then we also did organize for a few universities sessions on integrative law, conscious contracts, and some of the glimpses here are from University School of Law and Legal Studies, Guru Gobind Singh Indraprasth University. This is Professor Vani. He was really, really supportive. He really liked, I think he really personally believes in the concept of law as a spiritual force. So he was really welcoming to the concept. And this was a session we had on conscious contracts in Sharda University as well. So I think we did meet a lot of other people as well during that time, and we did gather a lot of support. And so yes, that was just a brief glimpse of the work we did while Kim was here. And once Kim left, so I tried to build on the momentum that we gathered while Kim was here. And so basically the work I continued doing, or basically I did after Kim left, which relates to the integrative law movement, was basically I was enrolled as a mediator, empaneled as a mediator with Delhi Dispute Resolution Society. I did take up trainings in restorative justice. So restorative justice, I think the first ever training that happened in India was organized by National Law School of India, University Bangalore. In association with they have a child center for child in law. So I was part of that, and then there was another training, I think the same year or within 1 year from it, that was organized by UNICEF. Apart from these two, I also did organize different sessions. I organized sessions or trainings on restorative justice, on mindfulness, on forgiveness sessions with different organizations. I worked with prisons, I worked with NGOs, I worked with legal networks like Legal Hackers, etc. And yes, of course, I've worked as a co-founder then of the Legal Hackers India chapter. I also worked on legal innovation, which is all part of the integrative law movement. And here are some glimpses of the work I did after Kim left. So this one is basically from the first training ever on restorative justice in India. And when I say restorative justice, I do not just mean the restorative justice that we understand as being more reformative, but I focus on the restorative justice, which we mean where we give more importance to victim-centered law, where the healing of the victim takes over. It's not just about reformation of the offender, it's also about the healing of the victim. So yes, these two trainings were organized. Then these are glimpses of my work with the Costa prison here. This was with legal hackers in New York. These are some of the others. I think these were with NGOs and my work as legal hackers. So moving on to what I'm doing currently. So actually I moved out of India and therefore I cannot really take over. I could not really continue a lot of my work in India on integrative law and related concepts. Right now I pursued to basically pursued to scale up my mediation practice. So I have pursued international peace studies from a UN mandated university called UPeace here. It is almost over and I'm now working on a project for a possible conflict resolution center here. And let's see where it goes. Here, I would like to brief you guys upon, some of the briefly the developments that are taking place on some of the models, like Kim called them, of integrative law that are happening in India. So of course, mediation is, I think, a very small part of integrative law. But yes, in India, mediation is, I think, the most common part which relates to integrative law and is very, very widely prevalent in India so far. But I think pre-litigation mediation is still relatively new. We need a lot more work, and I'm really glad we have the Family Courts Act, which of course almost mandates pre-litigation mediation in family disputes, as well as we have the Commercial Courts Act now, which provides for pre-litigation mediation in commercial matters as well. I also see there's a need for community justice. I know there have been some endeavors. I would not say they have yet gathered as much momentum as they should. I am happy to say that restorative justice has really taken off. I don't think it's still as mainstream or we all know about it as much, but I know there are pilot projects. Many civil society organizations working in child sexual abuse or in gender abuse or basically criminal justice. So they are working on pilot projects and trying to adapt the whole concept to the Indian context. I think we all know about many legal innovations, especially the legal tech, the many legal websites that we have. I think Law Essentials is, of course, one of them as well. I think we have work being done on online dispute resolution with the whole Agami and Sama and, that the meetups that recently took place. Then, of course, law tunes, and there are many access to justice projects. So there's a lot of work being done on legal innovations and legal change making. Mindfulness, soft skills training, which is also emotional intelligence training, as well as use of therapy for law. I wouldn't say they are being used as much yet in the same ways, but I think as Indians and as having a cultural background of using therapy or using yoga or stuff like that, spirituality for anything. So I think at personal level, a lot of lawyers that I know, they have been working on these stuff in their own personal lives or even with their clients. So yes, these are some of the developments. And of course, we have the current Lawyers as Peacemakers series, which I am really glad, because I think right now, we are all going through these unprecedented times of coronavirus. We all need a respite. It's not just to keep ourselves engaged and to keep learning about something new through the online capacity, but also because the whole movement of integrative law is about somewhere it relates to your emotions. It relates to making lawyers more compassionate as persons. And I think since we are all going through these tough times, most of us are, it's very easy for us all to lose our, emotions or get frustrated. So I think this series is also in a way going to help us all in our personal journeys to navigate through this time. So I'm really glad, and I congratulate Nabeela, Farhan for this series. I would like to end this presentation by bringing up like two of the main challenges that I've faced during my work, on promoting integrative law in India. And I think maybe Kim can address, because I'm sure she has faced the same challenges in all the other countries that she has worked with. So of course, the main challenge is, conventional lawyers or conventionally, people who have the conventional mindset, they may sometimes appear to be closed-minded about these concepts. They may not give, they may basically undermine the importance of these. They may find them very soft in nature and not, not something that's meant for mainstream. So yes, that is a challenge I face, to convince them to, agree to or to support or promote these kinds of this paradigm shift. The other one, yes, I kind of faced, especially while I was working on restorative justice, is whether this is a question I started asking myself, whether at all integrative law is a little forward-looking in the Indian context, considering that a lot of us are basically somewhere lower on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I believe many of you would know of it. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs talks about, that so basically it's a hierarchy of the needs that a person has. And of course, the basic survival needs include the physical needs of food and shelter. And then we move on to social needs, and then emotional needs. And then there's needs of self-actualization. So basically, in a country where so many people are still not able to meet their physical needs of food and shelter, I do have my questions, whether emotional or psychological needs or a paradigm shift that seeks to make emotional or psychology or compassion as the mainstream part, how well will that work in the Indian context? So yes, those are my main challenges, and I think I'll stop sharing my screen and invite Nabeela and Kim to join in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nitya, for the wonderful insights. I guess I have a question for Kim now, and the question goes like, based on the challenges that Nitya has actually discussed with us, what are your reflections as far as the application of integrative law in the Indian context is considered? Kim.
Those are big questions. And I have a few ideas, and but I also think that my ideas are not the only ones that matter, because everywhere in the world, the legal culture is pretty similar. Like if I walk into a big law firm in Johannesburg or Sydney, or London or Amsterdam or New York, I will find the same culture as probably any big law firm in India, because they've been shaped by forces other than the local culture. So around the world, we have many of the same problems. We have lawyers who say, well, this is just soft. You're going to lose your edge. You have to be tough. And that's what we're taught in law school. We're taught that, don't show any vulnerability because it's dangerous. And so I think that that's common everywhere. But there's some research that shows that actually the so-called soft skills, and the name is unfortunate, because lawyers don't want to be soft. So that soft skills actually make for a more effective lawyer, happier clients, and a better experience for the lawyers as well. And so that trying to dehumanize ourselves, trying to take away all of the parts that make us a warm-blooded mammal, and become more like the shark or the snake that people use to describe us. That's actually not healthy for the profession, and it's not healthy for our clients or for our society. We are passionate people, and we can make a difference. So I think that's one piece of that. In the Indian context, I think Nitya is so right. And at the same time, because you have so many challenges, you also have opportunities. So as an integrative lawyer, part of the skill base is to be able to get out of that norm. So if you're thinking in the way of the big law firms that were created in places that didn't have the same problems and didn't have the same culture or the same opportunities, then you're going to be stuck in a box. And if you are looking at like, how can I make a difference? What are the ways? And I actually think in India, people are really good at this. It's like the creativity, the sort of that entrepreneurship of there are problems that need to be solved, and I have some skills to solve them. And how can I do that? So through social entrepreneurship, which is another piece that happens in this movement of, like finding a social problem and creating an organization to resolve that. And then you find your funds where you find them. You can get grants, you can charge a fee, you can find a benefactor, you can find yourself in a university. There are lots and lots of options for how do you bring your creativity so that I have some friends who the Center for Collaborative Awareness, they talk about that we are so stuck in that problem-solving mode that all we do is create more problems. And if we looked at the world from the circumstances are perfect for something, what are they perfect for? Like everything that's going on now, like COVID, like it's a terrible thing. It's a world disaster, and yet look at some of the things that have happened. People who were very resistant to change before are now being forced to change, and that's creating a lot of things. Like this series is possible because everybody's used to being online now, and that was an outgrowth of COVID. And so we are doing what I'm advocating, which is let's see what the circumstances are, and then what can we build or create from those circumstances. So did I hit most of them? Are there others? Oh, there's another.
Yeah, I guess you've just please.
Well, so the idea that the Maslow's, I also study spiral dynamics, which is another topic that we might talk about, which is about the evolution of consciousness that is directly related to the environmental conditions we live in. So if you are living on the street, it doesn't matter how otherwise enlightened you might be, your concern is for your survival. And you're not trying to, change the world, you're trying to live day to day. And if we had a natural disaster and we were suddenly in that survival space, and I think COVID has created that as well, our concerns would be shifted. And so it's not surprising, or even that there's nothing wrong, that some people are more interested in their survival, or some people are more interested in having to fight because their environment calls for that. That's and some people are only interested in making money, but there are people who are interested in this as well, and you have a huge population, and you have people at every level that are more interested in survival, and people who are interested in really being in a unitive consciousness. And there are actually 7 levels in the spiral dynamics model. Every level is represented. And so the people who are able to, that their environment allows them to pursue these other kinds of things, are actually creating a world that is better for everybody at all levels. So now
That's actually true, Kim. Yeah, that's actually true, because once we trace the development regarding the evolution and the history of international law per se, we see that we had times when it was supposed to be the soft law. And in recent times, we see the importance of international law. It has so many subsets and so many sub-laws in it. And it is not only a unifying, let's say, bond that actually creates a nexus between a lot of countries. So I think in times to come, we can obviously expect integrative law to be reaching those heights, also being accommodative of so many aspects of law and so many facets of law. With this note, I think we've given a brief teaser as to what integrative law in its most simplest sense is. And in the times to come, I believe that the vast array of topics which we've discussed over calls and messages, we'll be able to put that up in the most refined manner with by inviting a lot of speakers from around the globe, and it would be placed more in a well-versed form before the audience. So I think, Kib, let's inaugurate the session. That is the first lecture that we are going to organize in September, and let us unveil the name of a first speaker and conclude this session. Kim.
One of the speakers is Linda Warren Seeley. She's the executive director of the dispute resolution section of the American Bar Association. And she's going to be bringing some colleagues with her who are experts in ODR. And for each session, what we're talking about is we want to have someone from India as well as someone from outside of India, because all of these ideas can exist inside of India. And we want to demonstrate that.
So, right.
I think we can conclude the session.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think we have questions coming in from the audience, ma'am.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah.
So we have one question coming as to how this type of law is actually applicable in offenses which are not of serious nature.
So I think that maybe the questioner is asking about restorative justice. And so when things, I have worked in restorative justice in murder cases, and it's unusual when that happens because most of the restorative justice in the world is in cases that one would consider less serious. Now, if you are a crime victim, it's very serious to you. It doesn't matter whether someone stole your bicycle or burned your house or whatever. For you, it's an impact. It's serious to you. And so I don't want to minimize that. But for cases that people consider less serious, often the people who are doing the crime are people who maybe young people, and maybe it's the first time they got caught, and they've actually discovered that when you have to face the person and see the humanity of the person that you have harmed, you are far less likely to do that crime again. So it's often used in those kinds of crimes. Now, that's another place where it's very complex, because if people are stealing for survival, then I think that's another piece that you bring in the community, and you look at the bigger picture of where does crime come from, and that's also part of restorative justice, part of the inquiry.
And if I may add, so I think I'm really thankful for this, whoever has asked this question, because in fact, in Indian legal framework, we already have a provision for this. We have the compoundable of, I think that's section 320 of IPC or CRPC. So it's basically compoundable. Excuse me if the section number is wrong, because I haven't gone through it for a while. But yeah, so compoundable offenses allows for restorative justice to come in there, because in less serious offenses, there's more of a possibility for victim offender mediations to take place, and then for the victim to actually forgive, and then also take back take back the FIR. So in the Indian context, yes. And I think world over, it's more in the less serious offenses.
I think we're also appreciating a lot of these principles for the reason that there are a lot of possibilities of victim turned offenders. So people are actually trying to break the chain. So the idea is about breaking the chain and making people, come to face to realize the wounds. So that's the whole idea. Yes, you have another question, I guess.
Yeah, we have another question coming in from Chandra Hassa. Is integrative law movement the next huge wave for the legal profession?
Somebody has been reading. That's actually a headline from the American Bar Association. They had that very headline, and I'd like to say yes. And the American Bar Association actually, the article with a title very much like that implied that they believe that it is a big wave. So thank you for the question.
The next question coming in from Chandrasekhar, is integrative law mainly focused on mediation, or there are other aspects to this?
Oh, many more aspects. Many more aspects. You can be an integrative lawyer and do litigation.
Just to answer, just to answer that, Farhan, because that's the last question that we are taking for this session. So to answer that, I think we'll ask the audience to basically keep tuned in to the whole series. So that's why we've made this as a series, because restricting the whole concept of integrative law in a bottle jam formula is not something that we're looking at. We're looking at a bigger picture, and I think that is why it's going to be a monthly series. And there's a promise to the students of India and abroad that every month all the innovative topics that we can even think, and that's what the conveners here are actually looking forward to. So I, Kim, and Nitya are actually doing a lot of brainstorming to bring up every possible topic which we think can have an integrative law angle in the Indian context, and put up the best possible speaker from India and outside and discuss at length the possibilities of integrating the healing effect of law in the Indian perspectives. So that is how we're going to take it from here. Farhan, I think it's all over to you now. Yes.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And I think it was a really insightful session. The audience has really liked you. I would like to make a few concluding statements. So actually, when I first came across integrative law and actually was introduced to Kim Wright ma'am from Nabeela ma'am, so when I actually went through the material, it just struck to me that in the Indian context, presently, it is really relevant for today, because if you have seen the recent Hyderabad rape case, wherein the police who actually went ahead and invite Gurleen Kaur for giving a formal vote of thanks to the speakers who have come in today.
Good evening, everybody. On behalf of the entire team of Law Essentials, I would like to thank all the three speakers of today's webinar, Ms. J. Kim Wright, Ms. Nabeela Siddiqui, and Ms. Nitya Bansal, for taking out their valuable and precious time for conducting integrative law. It is indeed the biggest day in the history of Law Essentials. We are extremely honored for this opportunity, ma'am. We truly appreciate the work done by you with different organizations across the world. Once again, we thank you for your support and inspiring us to be peacemakers in the society. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much to all the audience who have attended today's session. Signing off is Mohammed Faranzi, founder of Law Essentials.